bringing me along, Paul. I appreciate it. My name is Dani Saadu, and I'm Global Head of People Development for Collinson. And I've been in learning and development and people development in different sectors for the past 15 to 16 years. And like Paul said, I interacted with him a few months back when we kind of went into this lockdown and the global pandemic started. And I suppose what was beneficial for me is having an experience of actually remote working. So I was a global account director for a digital marketing pharmaceutical company back in 2010, 2009 for a period of years. It was I took a couple of years break from L&D, and I was managing a remote working team, and a lot of my experience came from there as well. And one of the things we were able to do is when we went into lockdown and this transition of our whole global offices going into remote working, we were able very quickly to put some content together in a matter of 2 weeks, a global working from home program that talked about what is the best practice for employees, managers, and leaders. And subsequently, as a result of putting that program together, from data analysis and anecdotal feedback we've got from our senior leadership team, we've been able to identify 6 core skills that we feel are needed right now to drive effective remote working. Because one of the things we identified is that the core skills that are needed in a face-to-face office environment are either different or needed in more are more pronounced when working remotely. And that's hopefully what I'll talk about in this session. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Dani. So look, what I'll do is...
Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'll just bring myself on mute. So I'm just going to share the screen now, just share my working competencies, which we talked about. If you could maybe set the tone with that, and then we'll kind of break each one down. So hopefully, you should be able to see my screen there, Dani?
Yeah, I can, yeah.
So if you want to just kind of talk us through kind of, I suppose, how you came to distinguish these 6 things as the key need moving forward, and then we'll kind of break each one down.
Okay, so first and foremost, what we did was we put together, like I said, in the first kind of like 2 weeks of when we went to lockdown, we just knew, I suppose from my experience of kind of like managing remote teams historically, and also my boss as well, having experience with this, we sat down and we sat down together and we said, it's very important that we put together some form of best practice and guidance around what remote working will look like. Because for those people who experience remote working, there is a different skill set, and there's also a different set of challenges working from home than working in the office. So we put together kind of like a global program that everyone went through over a period of time. And also we got our managers to cascade the kind of like guidance to their teams. And we pitched, and we had 3 tiers to the program. We had guidance and practice for employees, managers, and leaders. And we delivered that program over a month period. In the first month, we went into lockdown. And as we kind of like delivered this program, and what we would do every time we would kind of like delivered a virtual program online, we would send out online feedback after each of our development classes. And we do our development classes on Zoom because it has the best functionality. And one of the questions we would ask is, one of the questions we had on our feedback questionnaire is, what is the core skill that you feel that is really important to this new way of working? And that was one of the questions we had on our feedback after the training. And also every month we send out a pulse well-being survey to just check on how people are doing. And one of the questions on there is, what are the necessary skills right now you need to be proficient and effective within the workplace, within this new way of working? And we collated all the data together, plus we interviewed senior leaders within our organization, and we came up with these six skills. So we didn't identify them necessarily right at the beginning. Some of them we thought they would be the skills, kind of like we kind of predicted and assumed they would be, but some of them actually came to the forefront after data and analysis. And these are kind of like the 6 skills we have identified within our organization. And I hope they resonate with you, and I hope they are the skills that you find within your organization in terms of that resonate with what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve when it comes to remote working. And the first one is being technology proficient. And what this is about is that we are finding within our organization, it's no longer acceptable to say I'm not IT savvy, I'm not comfortable with tech, I'm not really good with IT, because actually remote working is 100% reliant on using digital solutions. And with all things, if you aren't good at something, you can practice, you can train, you can learn, you can develop yourself in any skill to become better at it. And officially on our LMS, we have official e-learning training on Microsoft Teams, Microsoft 365, SharePoint. We have training on Workplace, which is our Facebook for Business that we use. We also have a performance engagement tool that we have training on there for. So all of our digital platforms that we most commonly use, there is training that we offer either face-to-face or on our LMS. And we recommend people to go on that training so they can learn all the core functionalities about the solution. So they know shortcuts, they know how, functionalities that can help them work smarter, because we are finding people who are more comfortable with the technology are more productive, hit their deadlines, are more personally effective, and are better working collaboratively. Yeah. The second skill that was highlighted is around a people-centric approach. Remote working brings up different challenges, especially working from home. Yeah. Some people have kids, some people have families, some people are carers, some people are self-isolated, working on their own. Working from home and being self-isolated from your colleagues brings up different challenges. And we have identified that having a people-centric approach is very important right now. And moving forward, especially with remote working. What we mean by that is that when you are interacting with your colleagues, it's very important to have a human approach and to just ask the questions on how you are doing. Purposely creating the time to check in with people's emotions and how they are feeling. And this actual approach is more natural to certain people compared to others. So some people's natural management style is very people-centric and some people's is not. Whereas actually it's needed across the board to have this approach, because people are struggling right now, yeah, with thinking about loads of different things. It's unprecedented times, it's unknowing times. People are struggling about maybe job security. People are struggling with being at home around their loved ones all the time. Some people are struggling being away from their colleagues. Some people want to be in the office. Loads of different things they're struggling with. And if you, as managers and leaders, if we don't acknowledge what our people are going through, it will come out in some other form. So we are very much encouraging people to have a people-centric approach and just asking questions how people are feeling, showing some empathy and checking in with people. So if you've not spoken to somebody in a while, we encourage people in our organizations to check in and find out how they're doing. Yeah. The third skill is effective time management. Working from home, what can happen is that you get tempted into working longer hours. And that's what's happening in Collinson. We are finding people are working longer hours and are more stressed, even though they're working from home, which is crazy, right? But actually, because of the fact your bed is really close to your office, yeah, and you don't really have to commute to go anywhere, you get tempted and sucked into long hours. And before you know it, you've done ridiculously long hours and it's nighttime. You look out the window, you're like, oh my God. So people are finding it really hard to manage their time and to effectively prioritize what they need to do. And one of the challenges around that is that not everybody in our organization has really clear, good, smart, short-term objectives. And one of the things we've identified is that actually when you set objectives, when you are working remotely, it is very important to have objectives that are short-term, not long-term. Yeah, because having shorter term objectives keep you more focused, keeps you more driven, and also forces you as a manager and a leader to check in with how the objectives are doing, because they're shorter term. When they're a longer term, they're sometimes forgotten about. People therefore lose a sense of purpose, and they're just spinning loads of plates and doing a lot of kind of firefighting, actually, instead of focusing on things that really add value, and therefore struggle to manage their time. And the other thing as well is that people are struggling within our organization to find the right work-life balance, because they're working long hours. And actually, if you don't manage the work-life balance, you can burn out even if you're working remotely, and also it can add to added stress. Yeah. The fourth skill that has been identified is a growth mindset. And actually, there's a company called Udemy who does global kind of like training, and they're kind of like a global learning provider. And they did a presentation at the Learning Technologies Forum in Excel, I think it was in February 2020. And one of their directors was presenting what are the top 10 fastest growing soft skills in 2020, and growth mindset was number one. Yeah, and actually it resonates within the data we found. A growth mindset is absolutely fundamental in this remote working, in this new normal, in this unprecedented unknown times. And a growth mindset basically dictates that you are somebody who, if you have a growth mindset, you believe you can be good and proficient and competent in anything as long as you create the time, you develop yourself, you practice, yeah, and you have the real energy and drive to really be good at that thing. The other thing a growth mindset gives you is it allows you to be able to embrace challenges and manage change really well. And also you accept that when failure happens or you make a mistake, you don't take it personally. You see it as a learning and you can move forward. And also you proactively look at your areas for development and proactively develop yourself or seek where you can get training and improve yourself. So that's been very important. And we found teams that have a really growth mindset are performing higher than teams that do not. Yeah. And then the fifth skill we identified is adopting a coaching approach. Because now everyone is remote working within Collinson, people can hide more easily. And also people are I suppose more concerned with what's going on out in the world because of what's going on with this global pandemic and job security. People are fearful to make mistakes. We are finding people are sometimes less proactive and less taking risk. And also when when people are in crisis management, they tend to just default to being told what to do. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that. And we're also seeing people who are not having a clear sense of purpose, who are being demotivated, finding it easier to hide. And that's putting a lot of pressure on some of our managers and leaders. And actually what we've identified through data is that actually adopting a coaching approach where you are asking people questions and getting them to think for themselves and not just telling people what to do and giving them direction is more impactful and better long term. In the short term, you feel as a manager and leader, it's quicker to just tell people what to do because you move quicker. But long term, it's not. A coaching approach is more powerful and also drives performance. It gets people to think for themselves. It gets them to take ownership and accountability. And also when people are struggling with managing change or struggling with their emotions, taking a coaching approach and asking them about what they are feeling right now, what they can do to improve is better for their development, for their well-being, and for their psyche. So we've seen some managers coach people to support their well-being as well. Such a powerful approach. And the last one is managing upwards. As managers and leaders, we don't have all the answers. We're not the finished article. None of us have been through a global pandemic before. We're all going through this for the first time. So therefore, it's very important that our teams are engaged, they are on their game and are fighting on all cylinders. And therefore, you want a team that is engaged and is managing upwards and challenging you and taking things to a better place, and also identifying things when things might be going wrong. Yeah. And that is so important in these times because we're all going through this together. We need to be all in this together as teams. And therefore you want to make sure that your teams and you yourself are managing upwards to take things to a better place. So there's kind of like the 6 skills we've identified. And as a result, we've therefore adapted our offerings and adapted our working from home program to incorporate all of these skills and ensuring that we are able to drive the capability across these skills in the organization. Basically.
Brilliant, cheers, Dani. So I'm just gonna stop sharing now, just bring us back onto the screen. So everybody, look, there's a lot Dani's just covered there, and I'm going to ask a couple of questions now. But if anybody has any questions, just pop it in the chat box, and once Dani and I are done, I'll ask them to Dani after that. So as you mentioned at the beginning, it seems like you used the data to work out what people wanted and needed, both internally and what you were seeing externally as well. So from that, then, could I assume there's been a real appetite since it's been rolled out from everybody in the business to really learn these skills which you've identified?
Yeah, so say that again, Paul?
Yeah, so it seems you use the data internally to
yes.
identify what these skills are that people needed. So people are asking for it. So has the uptake and the appetite for learning these skills been really good?
The demand for people development in L&D has gone up threefold. So it's tripled since we've gone into this kind of like lockdown and remote working. And what the reason for what we have understood it from the data is because people are now reflecting more on their skills, yeah, and they are more conscious about developing themselves. Maybe because they don't know if their job is going to be secure a year from now. Also, the moving transitioning into remote working has thrown up challenges that they hadn't addressed before when they were in the office. So one of the things we've I suppose we've identified within Collinson is that the things we've, as a people and culture HR team, we were encouraging managers to do and leaders to do and employees to do when we were face to face. Yeah, those things they weren't doing that we were encouraging them to do in the office, they're now they're not doing them remotely, as just amplified the issues that they, yeah, because what happens is, so for example, the managerial and doing the basics that we've asked people to do in the office, if they're now not doing them remotely, it just makes it even worse and more challenging, because you are now working remotely from people and you can't check in on, yeah, you can't see what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So we have actually been pushing people to go back to managerial basics, and actually we've now reinforced some of the messages we were really harping on about when we were in the office face to face.
And I had written down a question, but Pete Fullard's actually just asked it as well, so I'll quote him. So, how are you encouraging a growth mindset?
Oh, that's a great question. So the way we've been encouraging it is that we've been pushing people across the organization to have objectives. And I know it seems really simple, but actually, before I joined, only 20% of the organization had formal objectives when it came to performance. We've now moved that up to 70% in the last 3 years through pushing the culture of the organization from performance management to performance engagement. Yeah. And we've been driving everybody to have objectives. And there are two types of objectives we push people to have within the organization: business and developmental. And we say it's absolutely mandatory for everybody to have business and developmental. Yeah. When we were in the office face to face, people pushed business objectives because it was linked to KPIs and business deliverables. Those were more tangible. But people lacked and didn't push developmental objectives. So we had about, at our best, at our height, we had 80% of the organization having business objectives, but only 15% of the organization having developmental objectives. And developmental objectives are absolutely fundamental and critical to a growth mindset. How do you drive yourself? How do you grow? How do you develop if you don't know what your developmental needs and objectives are, if you don't have a plan? So we have been pushing people to have more developmental objectives, and people are more now willing to accept and take it on board because of this new way of working. And also also we've linked people having developmental objectives to supporting well-being and engagement and motivation long term. Yeah. So what we now have is everybody now has developmental objectives, and that increased from 15% to about 75%. And now people now have PDPs and personal development plans, which we didn't have before. So that's massively increased and gone through the roof. And managers are now using that to drive the conversation around growth mindset. Yeah, and to address things like managing change, embracing challenge, taking risk, and learning from mistakes. Yeah.
And with short-term objectives you mentioned, which are of course so important, what time frame are you using, says Pete?
We're using a quarter. So we're saying we're now encouraging people to not have objectives longer than 3 months, because you don't know what the economy and the environment's going to look like in 3 months. Yeah. And also when you're working remotely from people, because you don't have the opportunity just to kind of like get up and check in with people ad hoc, over someone's desk, it's so important to have shorter term objectives, which encourage you as a manager and a leader to check in more regularly with the people you're managing. And also it keeps people more focused if they've got shorter deadlines and shorter goals and targets to meet, especially in this way of working. Because we are finding that, and what we're encouraging people is for people to do the basics, but little and often, so more consistently. So short bursts, but more consistently in terms of your approach.
And Pete also finished off, he said, are you using an objectives and key results approach?
Yes. So we've got a system called BetterWorks that is a digital tool that allows us to do performance engagement. And we've defined performance engagement as the driving of someone's performance where the manager and the employee are both engaged in interactions that are little and often to drive the employee to a high performing state. We scratched having performance appraisals like a couple of years ago, moved to this performance engagement model where we have business and developmental objectives. Business objectives are also, we can also align them to our managers and to our team and business and corporate objectives. To have regular one-to-ones, where you have different type of one-to-ones, objective one-to-ones, career one-to-ones, well-being one-to-ones, different one-to-ones depending on what you're trying to achieve, and also creating a feedback culture where you can give feedback in the moment to anybody in the organization.
Anybody else? If anybody else has any questions, then please do pop them in the chat box. In regards to a coach mindset, and this resonates with me because I think we were talking the other day. I think in a crisis, as a manager, sometimes you feel more inclined to tell people what to do rather than
yes, you do.
Help them work out the answer themselves. So, how difficult has that been to kind of implement in terms of modules to create that coaching mindset rather than the telling?
It's really difficult, actually. We had to create a more kind of robust and advanced program specifically just for coaching, and we've called it our Coaching Excellence Program. And it's broken up, and we've now broken the program into a modular global program. And one of the things we focus on is actually coaching people around mindset and well-being, and that's another thing we use to drive a growth mindset. That is probably one of the hardest things we're struggling with, is adopting a coaching approach, because what we're trying to do, and the kind of like the vision and the utopia where we're trying to get to is a coaching culture, is what we're trying to create, a coaching culture. And we are doing that through performance engagement and driving performance and performance metrics and numbers. We're doing it through trying to engage and advocate supporting people's well-being, and it's a good way to do that, and it's a good way to long-term develop and motivate and engage people. And one of the things we were able to show in our Pulse well-being survey is that data shows that people are more happy and more content when they're being coached by their manager and they're thinking for themselves, and they're being empowered than being told what to do. So we've got data also to back that up, that people actually prefer it as an approach.
Makes sense, absolutely. We've got a new question from on the chat box. So, do you think that the need for more regular catch-ups and planning within teams is in danger of being counterproductive due to the time it takes? How would you ensure that you're striking a balance?
Great, it's a good question. You ask your teams. It's bespoke to different people. So what we don't do, and you have to be very careful, because you have to treat people like adults. What we don't go is, here's a blanket approach to how many meetings you must have in this new way of working. We give a recommendation, but what we say is that actually we recommend that you agree ways of working within your specific teams. But one thing that is definitely proven is that you need to increase your frequency of interaction when you are remote working and managing virtual teams compared to when you're in the office. That is something that's a given, and that's been proven by research and stats. But how often you have that is down to the department, down to the role that you do, and down to what your deliveries are, what your output is. When people turn around and say, well, Dani, we don't want to spend all our time just having loads of interactions because actually we need to get work done, I say that's completely fine. What I suggest is you have interactions that are little and often. And one of the recommendations we say is about taking an agile approach. So we are massive agile advocates within Collinson. An agile approach is looking at things like Scrum, Kanban, and that way of working, where actually Agile's methodology and mantra is about little and often. Yeah. And one of the things a lot of teams are now doing things like weekly or daily stand-ups, which are literally 10 to 15 minute time-boxed events where you just check in to say, are you on track with your goal and objective? What did you do since the last time we met that's really added value? And what are some of your challenges? And it's just really short, sharp, time-boxed, and then you move on. So it's about being disciplined to have shorter interactions, but more frequent is what I would recommend. But the number depends on the team.
Gotcha, makes sense. And a new question, what metrics are you using to measure performance engagement?
Great question. So we've got so the three things we look at and we drive in terms of performance engagement is everybody having business and developmental objectives. Yeah. And we have a way of measuring your percentage of completion of objectives on this digital tool that we have. We also have regular one-to-ones to keep progress of how you're doing against your business and developmental objectives. Yeah. And also we encourage people to give, 2 to 3 pieces of feedback every quarter. So you get a wider view from internal stakeholders and external stakeholders on how the person is performing. But we also have quarterly check-ins, quarterly reviews is what we call them, which is a 15-minute one-to-one where you give a scoring for that quarter of how the person has performed in that quarter from 1 to 5. So by the end of the year, when you have your last quarter, you would have had 3 scores before, and then you have 4 scores that you can use for for the whole year performance. And what's good about the quarterly score is that if you, for example, in quarter 1 score, so our scores is 1 to 5. Let's say you score a 3 in quarter 1, you have an opportunity to improve to a 4 and a 5 in the next quarters. Yeah, you know what you need to do to improve as you go through your quarters instead of waiting right to the end of the year to then just have 1 score. So that's how we do it.
And how do you manage underperformance remotely? As it can come across a lot more formal when you want to keep it casual over video.
Good question. And there are certain things that you can't substitute for face-to-face. Yeah, there's just certain things you can't overcome with face-to-face. But what you want to try and do is create an empathetic environment as much as possible through your interactions. Yeah, and one of the basic things we say within our organization is, please have your camera on when you're interacting. And I know people are having death by webcam. I get it. Some people at the end of the day go, I just want to turn my webcam off. But actually, if we think about the 3 V's, Albert Malbarian's, visual, vocal, and verbal. If you take the visual out, you've only just got verbal and vocal left, which makes the communication not as effective. So that's fundamentally one thing. The other thing as well is that it is very difficult to get away from, I suppose, a formal approach of interaction, because it's difficult because you have. One of the things we don't do is, so we use Teams as a way of connecting, right? A way of communicating. Best practice, what we have said is you shouldn't just call somebody, call out of the blue. We say you should message them first to check that they're at their desk. Yeah. So, hey, are you all right? Are you free now to talk? Best practice, good way, of employee cadence. And people, most of the people in Collinson have agreed with that. So you check in, send a message, and then you say, oh, do you have now time to, catch up? And then you catch up. And there's no real way of doing that, unless because you can't just have a coffee with somebody in the kitchen or in a coffee bar in the office. So it has to be more of a deliberate approach. Yeah. But I think when you are in the moment of the interaction, you can make it less formal by the way you come across, by asking questions about how they're feeling, just checking in with them, by having a smile on your face and making it more people-centric. But in terms of your approach and making it less formal, it's very difficult when it's virtual. You have to be deliberate, because you can't just have those natural conversations in an office.
And I've got a couple more questions. Oh, we've got a big one that's come into the chat. So let's go straight to that, actually. So have you conducted any quantitative research showing these core skills predict key outcomes? So example, performance, job satisfaction, customer service in a remote setting, in addition to the data you mentioned initially, using what people think would be effective and what they want to develop. It's quite a big question there. And in other words, demonstrating empirically that they actually are the most essential skills in this setting.
That's a good question. So where we're up to right now is that we ask these questions from a well-being, like I said, we ask these questions from a well-being survey. We ask these anecdotally, and we asked them. We got them from feedback from training. We got them from our well-being, so we asked them anecdotally from our leadership team. We are just in the process now of determining whether or not, if we focus on these skills, are they going to connect to KPIs and an improvement in performance? Yeah. So if we give me another couple of months, I will have some more quantitative feedback around whether or not it's connected to KPIs. We've only been doing it for 4 or 5 months. So that aspect, which is kind of like, I would say, closing the loop, we've not been able to do yet. So hopefully, if Paul invites me back in a few months, I'll be able to show you some data to show that actually has contributed to KPIs and to performance metrics. But trust me, I'm on the case, because I'm very much around people development and learning and development that shows a return on investment or return on OE or return on expectation. Is very important for me. So I will definitely be showing data on that at some point. But I'm hoping in the next couple of months, because it's something that my boss has also challenged me on.
Absolutely. I think that we'll absolutely have you back. And the webinar we had last week on remote onboarding with Oscar, he was talking about, really 2020, we're all guinea pigs this year, aren't we? We've just got to track and measure everything as best we can to see what works. But I suppose the final question for me was, how do you think, based on what you've seen so far, how do you think these 6 competencies, how do you think they will evolve? And what else do you think might get added to that list the further we go down the line?
Good question. So before I answer that question, something I did want to say was that I've had the opportunity in these last 5 months to be involved in webinars like this and in a lot of virtual forums. So yesterday, before you guys came on, I was just telling Paul I was moderating a conversation with senior HR directors in America, across America, across different states, and they were talking to me about how their culture dealt with kind of like transitioning to remote working, what were the challenges, and actually what their employees want long term when it comes to remote working. And all of them unanimously said that actually most of their organization want remote working in some form of hybrid, if some of them actually want it completely 100%. So this is going to be the new normal. And it is so important that actually, if you want to be successful in the workplace moving forward, you need to be competent in day-to-day in the office skills and also remote working, and be able to do both if you want to be really successful. So that's a very important point. And I think, in answer to your question, Paul, I think that the things that are really going to evolve for me is people are going to have to manage it. The people-centric approach, I think, is something that's massive. Yeah, I know, and I'm not saying that we need to turn into guidance counselors, because that is a qualified skill set that you need, and we're not talking about that. But definitely, what we have found in Collinson is that actually people are forming stronger personal relationships with people, even though they're working more remotely, which is really crazy, because people are working in their home. You feel more open to talk to people about what's going on in their world. Yeah. And actually we're finding that people are forming stronger bonds, and actually people want to see each other more, and people are really crying out to go back to the office more so now, because they've formed really stronger bonds because of this remote working. So this people-centric approach, I think, is going to be a skill that is absolutely fundamental as leaders and managers moving forward. In this, you need to be able to engage and compel and show empathy and drive people who are remote working as well as people in the office. You need to be able to flex your style and be able to connect with people and show empathy. You can't just be, it's not just going to be enough to be really demanding and dictatorial. You have to also be able to show a more empathetic, supportive side as a leader and manager, definitely. The other thing as well, I think, is really going to be important, and I think is going to really evolve, is a coaching approach. Yeah, a coaching approach, and creating a coaching culture. Because what I suppose what we want to get to, and an ideal situation, is for our teams to be remote working and to be delivering, and for a peace of mind of managers and leaders to know our teams are absolutely performing at their highest, they're engaged and they're delivering, and you're not with them when they're remote working, right? And one of the approaches that's going to help people get to that is adopting a coaching approach. And creating a culture within your team where people aren't just sitting there waiting for you to tell them what to do. They're taking ownership and doing it themselves when you are not around. And coaching is going to, in my mind, is going to become very, very important. And it's something that everybody is talking about internally. And it's probably one of the most, out of the 6, it's the one that people are talking about the most, because it can affect so many areas. It can drive performance. It can support people's well-being. It can keep people motivated and engaged. It can support people through their career. It has such a multifaceted approach, coaching. So that is another one. And I think time management is really key. We're gonna have to be very careful about people working longer hours in this way of working. That's one of the things I think when I've been speaking to people in different parts of the world, in different industries. The thing that has been consistent is people are now seeming to be working longer hours and are struggling with the work-life balance of switching off, and being able to effectively manage your time when you are spinning loads of plates and working remotely. People are finding challenging, and I think it's going to be very important. I know it's very simple. It's going to be very important for people to have really clear, focused objectives that when you complete them, you create new ones and they're ongoing, so people know what to prioritize and what to focus on, that that's either urgent or important.
Yeah.
In terms of new skills that I think maybe might be needed, yes, there is one. And I was talking to our people and culture leadership team about this last week. I feel people are going to need to improve their awareness around mental health. Yeah. We before we went into lockdown, we introduced a new initiative, which were global mental health first aiders. And it's something that's really been very useful in this kind of remote working and during this global pandemic and this lockdown. And it's been and I'm glad we did it. So we have global mental first aiders within our organization. And actually, a lot of the interactions I have with managers and leaders is around mental health. And what I've been very grateful for is that me and my team over the last 2 or 3 years have really developed our awareness around mental health. I'm now a practitioner around, I can do guided meditation. I'm a practitioner around mindfulness, things, I never knew anything about before. Me and my team have now become experts in that field, and that's really been very useful at supporting our business. And also managers in the organization who are aware and are comfortable with mental health are really able to drive their team's performance and keep them engaged. So that would be something I think is really going to be added to this mental health awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got a couple more questions in the box that have come up, so I'll ask these in a sec. But I think just on the time management side, it's really interesting because I think the old-fashioned mentality to working from home is that people aren't going to work hard enough. And absolutely, when Interquest first started working from home, I realised people were working even longer, and I was like, guys, you need to get off your computers and switch off. So it's so important. So another question from Pete, an interesting one. So, what differences have you seen in the way managers in different cultures and locations are reacting and adapting to the new normal within Collinson?
Good question. That's an excellent question. So, in America, for example, there's been so you've got a spectrum of how people have adapted to this. Yeah, you've got people who have had to just deal with it because we've had to do this, and are just are seeing this maybe as a short-term fill gap until they go back to the office, and all the way through to the spectrum of people who are absolutely embrace this and are comfortable with this and are happy if this is going to be the new norm, and will find a way of managing this moving forward, in a hybrid approach, or if this is 100%, and everything in between. So for example, in our American office, you've got our leadership team a little bit more, apprehensive around this being a long-term approach. I want people back in the office and want to make, and are apprehensive and wary, not being able to see what their teams are doing, all the way through to some of our teams in the UK will completely fully embrace this and actually are looking for this 100% longer term. Asia, for example, in Asia Pac, they've really embraced this, and I think the reason why they've embraced this is because anything that's given from a guidance point of view, they're very hierarchical. So if you give them anything in Asia Pac, they tend to just accept it and deal. Yeah, they're much more accepting around things. Some of our offices in Europe have struggled. Some of our kind of European offices, so offices in France and Spain, their culture is so much more around people interaction, really high energy and drive, and they've struggled working from home, some of them, and they've just, now that the lockdown is over in some of their countries, they've just gone back into the office and gone back into social distancing, because the culture, especially in Italy and France, is around kind of like people and that kind of thing. So it's a really good question. So it does depend on culture. But I suppose what we're doing as a people and culture team to say, regardless of what your approach is and what you do within your offices, we will be able to support you in whatever your approach is. Yeah. So if you want to have it, if it's a low percentage of remote working, we can support that. If it's a high percentage of remote working, we can also support that. We're giving people the option to decide whatever that looks like across the whole spectrum.
Cool, and good question, Pete. Thanks to Dani. So I've got a long question from Hiran. Okay, so we had a conversation with Hiran works with me in Interquest. So we had a conversation with a CTO the other day who said he thinks that working hours are based on the end product and outputs rather than a set number of time slots. So that 9 to 5 kind of working.
Yeah.
contracts moving forward, for example, wouldn't need to be contracted hours, 40 hours weeks, Monday to Friday, and even a set number of holiday for certain jobs if, I stress, if people are meeting their deliverables in their roles. Do you think this could happen, and could this be the new normal? Is this something that Collinson have considered when you're talking about,
Yeah,
you think
yeah,
about short-term
yeah,
objectives? Let's just
yeah.
focus on that. So,
Yeah. No, it's a good question, and I believe it can work. What the guidance we've given to people internally is to not focus so much at time at desk, but actually on output and deliverables. Yeah, and that's what. But you can only focus on output and deliverables if you clearly set them up ahead of time. So if you've got really clear objectives and really clear deliverables, and you've agreed what that looks like, then it's easier to monitor. But if you don't have those things, then it's harder to monitor. Yeah. So what we've encouraged people to do is to focus on output, deliverables, and objectives, not time at desk. Because if you do focus at time at desk, you're just going to stress yourself out. You can't expect people to be at their desk all the time when, especially if they're at home and they've got kids, or they're a carer, or they look after people, or whatever their situation is. You have to be more understanding and empathetic and flexible to people's way of working and home conditions, home and working conditions. What we've encouraged people is focus on output, focus on objectives, focus on deliverables more so. And as long as you're clear on what those deliverables are and you've ironed them out, and they're recorded in our Better Works, digital performance engagement tool, and you're measuring them, then it's easy to work with.
great. And then the final question we've got in the box for now then. So for Martha Fishery, how do you anticipate this shift will impact our use and dependency on business software and the use of technology?
Right. I feel it's gonna increase our usage of technology and platform. So one of the things we've now started to do, which we didn't used to do before, is we now provide guidance on what good technology etiquette looks like within our development programs and training. Yeah. So for example, one of the things we talk about is technology counts. So we say, the guidance we give: have a headset. First and foremost. Why? Because it's easy for you all to hear me. I'm talking to a mic, and when you don't have a headset, there's more of a chance of kind of like your voice to go all over the place and for you to get feedback. It's less likely when you have a headset. The other thing we encourage, for example, just little things like this. The other thing we encourage is that I've got a home hub in my house, but most people, 99% of people, use Wi-Fi. I don't. I connect my laptop wired access from my home hub into my laptop. So I've got a wired access like I would do in the office, because you are less likely to have Wi-Fi issues when you are using a wired access. So it just makes your broadband stronger to your laptop, and you don't then get drop out of Wi-Fi when you're moving around your house. Yeah, for example. Just those kind of hints and tips. Technology is absolutely fundamental to how effective you are at remote working. You need to become more comfortable with the digital solutions out there, and also you need to be proactively seeing what solutions out there can make you more effective in the workplace and allow you to work smarter. The other thing we encourage is using the right solution for the right interaction for what you're trying to achieve. So we use Microsoft Teams for one-to-ones and official team meetings. Yeah, but we use Zoom for team building events, for training, for big business meetings, and for client meetings. Because with Zoom, you can use virtual breakout rooms, you can use a whiteboard, you can share music. It has more of an interactive functionality, and therefore the experience is better. But you won't know that unless you're technology proficient, unless you know what the different solutions can offer you. And that is why it's so important to know what solutions are out there and to keep abreast of what the latest technology is, especially as people professionals, definitely.
Brilliant. Thanks for the question, Martha. And I think that's it for the questions, Danny. So I suppose, look, this has been really comprehensive and thorough, and you've covered a lot. Is there anything else you'd like to, I suppose, give in terms of advice or takeaways for people as we kind of just learn to adapt to this new world? Anything you'd like to kind of finish with?
Yeah, I would. I'm assuming most of you are people professionals, either from people and culture or human resources background or in human resources roles. One of the things I would say is that there has never been a more important time for human resources, the people and culture sector, than right now. People in organizations need the support and the help to transition to this new way of working, need the support around mental health, need the support around just having a real clear sense of purpose, motivation, and drive in their organization to make them the best they can be. and the reason why I say this is because what I'm finding, or you tend to find, is when companies look to make redundancies, human resources and people and culture seem to be the first place that goes, right? But I actually would argue that you need people and culture, you need HR more than you've ever needed them right now. And I'm lucky that my organization sees that and actually are reaping the benefits from that approach. That would be what I would say.
Brilliant, thanks, Danny. And is it okay? I mean, if people want to contact you after this, perhaps just to ask any follow-up questions, what's the best route for them to drop you a message? Or
LinkedIn. I'm heavily on LinkedIn. I write a lot of posts. I do a lot of blogs. I accept everybody, and I will do my best to message people back. So if you want to keep in contact with me, please contact me on LinkedIn. I'm making it my mantra in 2020 and beyond to do as much as I can to support people outside of my organization and to share best practice and just to increase my network. So if you want to work collaboratively or to share best practice or to just bounce ideas off me, I am very much welcome to it.
Thank you so much, and I'm sure there are people here who will take you up on that offer. Danny, thank you so much. Everybody who's tuned in, thank you very much for attending today. Next week's webinar is going to be around embedding D&I in your business, so please do tune into that. But yeah, thanks a lot, guys, and Danny, thanks again. It's been great. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much for having me. Hope you guys enjoyed it. See you. Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.